Hey guys, all right, so I don't feel like we need to spend a lot of time on ordering decimals. You guys are experts on ordering whole numbers, and when it comes to whole numbers and decimals, it's the same but different. That's right. So if you can order whole numbers, you can order decimals. It's the same exact thing with a twist. So let me show you just how similar it really is. If we take a look here, same idea, we're going to be ordering these numbers, in this case, from least to greatest. As soon as we figure out what order, let's go ahead and label our template down here with an L for least and a G for greatest. We're going to put up those brick walls. That was a terrible brick wall. And here's one over here. And of course, ordering is part of COAS. So I'm going to go ahead and line them up. And I'm going to start with 8 and 7/10. And what's nice about decimal numbers is they don't have a lot of digits. So the very next one also has an 8 in the ones place. And this one has a 3 in the tenths place, like the 7 is. But this number has a digit in the hundredths place. So I'm going to be able to fill that in that empty column there. And then, of course, I have another decimal number. Again, an 8 in the ones place, so that's going to go here. I have a 3 in the tenths place again, and I have a 5 in the hundredths place. And you can see I have an open empty spot here in the hundredths place from 8 and 7/10. So I'm going to go ahead and annex a 0. At this point, guys, it's exactly the same strategy as ordering whole numbers. I'm going to start over here, and I'm going to look for something different. So here I have 8, 8, and 8. Doesn't help me. But if you take a look at my tenths column, this 7 stands out. 7 stands out not because it's less, but because it's greater. So I know that this number here is going to go where I see a G in my template. What I need to make sure that I do, though, is I need to make sure that when I write the number in here, I'm not necessarily writing the number that I changed it to help me solve it, but I want to make sure I'm writing one of the original numbers that they asked me to order. So here I have 8 and 7/10, and I can even cross this out here because I know now I'm only left with 2. I can also cross this out here. Some of you guys have been rewriting the last 2 just to get them all kind of cleared up. But if you take a look, 8 and 7/10 is the greatest. That leaves us with the least space. So if I'm looking here, I can see a 3 and a 3. That doesn't help me find the least. But right here, I can see that the 2 is definitely less. So I'm going to go ahead and write this number, 8 and 32/100, which comes from right here. I didn't change it at all, so I can write it just as is, 8 and 32/100. And that takes care of that one. And so I have no choice but to fill in my remaining decimal number, 8 and 35/100 here. And this is where our eyeballs could deceive us. Who would have guessed that the 7 compared to the 35 and 32 would end up being the greatest? But again, it's 7/10, where these are representing smaller hundredths. So let's try another one. This one is greatest to least, so I have to make sure I pay attention to that so that I can label my template here with a G and an L. When I put up my brick walls, it allows me to see these numbers better so that I can copy them. I have 5 and 98/100. And I can see that this number is going to end up in the thousandths. So I can tell I'm going to have to annex some zeros. Here I have a 5 as well. I have a 9 in the tenths place, an 8 also in the hundredths place, but this number has a 2 in the thousandths place. And then, of course, my last one also has a 5 in the ones. I have a 9 in the tenths, a 7 in the hundredths, and just a 1 in the thousandths. And I'm going to go ahead and annex in a 0 here. And you can see I've lined up everything really nicely. So now it's time to get started. 5, 5, and 5 doesn't help me. 9, 9, and 9 doesn't help me. But right away, I can see this number here stands out as being different. The 7 is different from the 8 because it's less. So I'm going to go ahead and write this number, 5, and it's right here. I'm going to go back to the originals. 5 and 971/1000 is already done. So now I'm done with that. Again, if you want to rewrite the remaining 2, fine. But I know that here I'm looking for the greatest one. That's what I'm gonna fill in next. So they shared a 5, they shared a 9, they also share an 8. But when I look here, I can see a difference, and I can see the 2 is greater. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this second number here, this middle number, which is right here, where it says G in my template. So I have 5 and 982/1000. So that takes care of that one. which means that one's going to be in the middle. But if you remember, I annexed this 0 to start with. So when I write this number, I want to make sure I'm not writing the equivalent decimal I made. I'm writing the original decimal from the original problem, which is 5 98/100ths. So here you can see, crazy enough, that 971 ends up in the least spot from a 98. And that's because in this alternate universe, we don't want to be fooled by our eyeballs because we know what that equivalent decimal really meant. All right, this time we're ordering from greatest to least. It's going to be the same but different. I'm going to put my G here for greatest, my L here, and my brick walls are going to be stuck in here, except I don't want my brick walls to look like ones because I can see some ones there. So here we go. 0 and 56/100ths. Now I'm going to fill in this next one, but this next one has a 1 in the ones place, and then it only has one digit. I have to make sure I'm putting it in the right spot. This one is in the 10ths place, so I need to make sure it's lined up with the 10ths place from the other number. I don't have a 100ths place in 1 and 1/10, so I'm going to have an open spot there. And then this one has a 0, and it has a 4 in the 10ths place and a 3 in the 100ths place. And of course now you can see I have an open space where I can place a 0, not shove a 0 in between. I didn't want to make the 1 way in the 100ths place and fill the 0 in here. That changes the value of the number. That 0 can't shove in there. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and right away I can see something standing out as different. This 1 is different because it's the greatest. So I'm going to go ahead and stick it in right away. And I know that this number didn't start off with this 0. It started off just 1 and 1/10. So I'm going to write that number here. 1 and 1/10, cross it out. Cross it out here. A lot of kiddos have a hard time looking at two numbers that aren't touching. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite my remaining two numbers. I have 0 and 56/100ths, and then I have 0 and 43/100ths. My decimals look terrible. There we go. So now I'm looking for the decimal that's going to be the least. So 0, 0, but right away here in the 10ths place, this 4 is less than the 5. So I'm going to put the 0 and 43/100ths in the least spot and cross it out, which leaves only one remaining for that middle spot, 0 and 56/100ths. Don't forget to look in that whole number place value. If we had not looked there, we would have gotten the wrong answer. One whole is definitely worth more than the numbers that have 0 holes. All right, one last one because this one's a little bit different. Kind of some of the easiest types of questions look like this, in my opinion. We're going from least to greatest. Get our brick walls up here. And we have 2 and 38/100ths. And if you look, these all go to the 100ths place. So it's not going to be too bad here. 35/100ths and 2 and 39/100ths. Now, here's why I like these problems. 2, 2, and 2 doesn't help me. 3, 3, and 3 doesn't help me. But if you look here at the 100ths column, all 3 are different. If you ever get to a column where all 3 are different, instantly you can place all 3. This is the greatest, this is the least, which puts that in the middle. So I never annexed any zeros, so I can go straight from where I lined it up. We have 2 and 39/100ths gone. And now the least is going to be 2 and 35/100ths. And I can cross that out. And then 2 and 38/100ths is the last one. So same but different, guys. Focus on lining them up correctly and you'll be good. The last thing I want to talk about was something from the exit card yesterday, and I don't exactly remember what it was. It was that's not right. It was something like 43 and 8/10ths, and we were comparing it to something like, it might have been a little bit different, 8 and 9/10ths. Now, when we line them up, we have to make sure that place values get lined up correctly without changing the values of the digits. So if you notice, 43 is a 2-digit whole number. And here I only have a 1-digit whole number. I need to make sure I line it up correctly. And this 8's in the ones place. So I need to find the ones place from this number, which is right here. 8 doesn't have any 10s, so I could actually fill in and annex in a 0. And then, of course, we have the 9 in the 10th place. So please remember, guys, we have to make sure that when we're rewriting these numbers, they stay the same. They might become equivalent by adding a 0, but we can't ever change the value. It's time for you to now try some level jumper. You are going to grab a level jumper, and I want you to try level 1. You need to get, I think, 1 correct from level 1 before you check in, but I'm not sure. The directions say it on the top. Look on the left-hand side. It'll let you know.